So recently, Dana White has made a lot of announcements involving multiple cards such as UFC 314 in Miami, UFC 315 in Montreal, which is now going to be Jack Della Maddalena versus Bilal Muhammad, which led to the changing of the main event for the UFC London card, which is now going to be Sean Brady versus Leon Edwards. A lot of announcements. But arguably the most important announcement was Ilia Topuria is going to vacate the featherweight belt to move up to lightweight. Now, I personally have somewhat mixed feelings about this. The purist in me would have liked to see Ilia stay at featherweight for a few title defenses just to see how he would have stacked up against the contenders in that division, such as Diego Lopez and Movsar Evloev, and perhaps even Arnold Allen. But to be honest, I feel pretty confident that Ilia would have beaten all of them, pretty much anyone at featherweight, so I understand why he didn't stay there. He feels like there isn't enough of a challenge for him there. Which brings us to the lightweight division. I am excited for the possibilities Ilia has at lightweight. Just because I would have wanted him to stay at featherweight a little longer doesn't mean I'm blinded to the fights he could have at lightweight. I mean, it's pretty exciting stuff, to be honest. Dana White has said that they will announce who Ilia will face when they have it figured out, but other than Islam, I don't see a genuine challenge. I think they're all interesting, exciting fights, but other than Islam, I don't really see anyone that can challenge Ilia. I think he beats everyone other than Islam, but he does have a lot of options in terms of fun fights such as Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Arman Tsarukyan, and Charles Oliveira. And based on Dana's implications, it seems like he will first face a top contender, which also aligns with what Ilia's coach Jorge Clement Tomasi had to say a few months ago when he was being interviewed for Submission Radio. In the interview, he stated that he thinks if Ilia does move up to lightweight, it's unlikely that the UFC will just allow him to challenge directly for the belt, and that he would first have to fight a top contender. And based on where everyone stands in the division, it seems like that would either be Charles or Arman. Obviously, this is all dependent on how soon Ilia wants to fight, but if we are making the assumption that that fight's going to be sooner rather than later, the choices would be between the rightful contenders, which are Charles and Arman. You could also make the argument that guys like Charles and Arman have a higher probability of putting up a better fight and beating Ilia due to their grappling-based style, compared to guys who seem to rely mostly on their striking, such as Dustin and Justin. However, both Charles and Arman have also shown a propensity to leave themselves open for big punches. So I don't think it's likely that they will also win against a power puncher like Topuria. Also, I don't think the MMA community wants to see Charles get knocked out the same way that Max and Volkanovski got knocked out. Again, all these other guys would be fun fights, and I would be happy to see each of those fights, but I think Ilia will most likely beat all of them except Islam. I think Ilia is the only person at 155 who has a chance to beat Islam, which makes this fight all the more exciting to me. I mean, all these other guys, let's say Justin Gaethje gets through Dan Hooker, maybe he challenges Islam for the title. All these guys, Charles in his potential rematch with Islam, all these guys technically have a chance, but I think Ilia is the one who has the highest probability of beating Islam. Now, when getting to the reason of why Ilia is moving up to lightweight, it's because he can no longer make the weights. Or at least that's what his coaches say, that's what Dana White says. I mean, his coach also commented on this in the Submission Radio interview, stating that Ilia can weigh up to 187 pounds outside of camp, which is very interesting to note because although he is clearly in shape and he's a relatively big guy, he doesn't even look like the biggest featherweight. I mean, which is crazy to think because according to info out there, even Islam doesn't weigh as much as Ilia outside of fight camp. Islam has always said that he doesn't get very heavy out of fight camp and weighs around 180 to 182 pounds. Now, I don't know how true that is, but that's what he claims. Funnily enough, according to the info that was revealed at the night of the UFC 311 fights, Islam only weighed 178 pounds, while his opponent Renato Moicano weighed in 181.8 pounds. So despite how massive Islam looks, he actually doesn't weigh as much as some other fighters in the lightweight division. And when getting back to Ilia Topuria, Jorge Masvidal was actually on the Jackson podcast recently and talked about how he has known Ilia since Ilia first arrived to the UFC and that he trained with him, and when they were trained together that Ilia's punches felt very heavy, like a 170 pounder. When they were wrestling, he would comment that Ilia's bones felt dense, like extra dense, which might explain why he weighs so much, but then again, I'm not a doctor, nor do I know too much about human anatomy. But given how he knocked out Jai Herbert at 155, I'm not too surprised if that's the case. To sum up, it seems like Ilia will be first taking on a top contender, and in the likely result that he gets through them, he would take on Islam Makhachev, which I can't wait to see happen. That fight's going to happen sooner or later because you just know it has the potential to be one of the highest level MMA fights in a long time.